Hello, Solidus here, and I am back with my first class video for WoW's latest expansion, Shadowlands, due out on the 27th of October. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the Resto Druid and seeing how that has been playing for me in the beta, specifically in Mythic Plus dungeons, because that's where I focus most of my time, is running keys rather than raiding. So this video is going to be specifically looking at that. So, cut to the chase, do I think Resto Druid is going to be good for running keys in Shadowlands? Without a doubt, yes. At this moment in time, as it stands on beta, and things may change, for me this is the best healer to use when pushing keys. Now granted, some of the other healers are more than capable of doing so, but for me, Resto Druid still holds the top spot, and I'll come up with a few reasons why I think that is. So first of all, let's talk about some of the changes that we've seen, and we haven't seen too many major changes when it comes to Druid and the Resto form, but some notable things that we're going to get access to with new abilities that are being made baseline is Cyclone for a start. Cyclone will be a great ability in dungeons for some weeks, specifically bolstering, for example, where you could completely remove a mob from a pull, so that it doesn't get affected by bolstering, for instance, when everything else is dying around it. We're also getting access to Stampeding Roar, more mobility, more utility, and it just helps people move through these dungeons quicker, possibly avoiding some mechanics. For instance, it could be used in the last boss of Necrotic Wake to avoid the Comet Fall, or whatever that ability is called. I'm sure you'll find some use for it, but again, it's just some good utility for us. In terms of some other changes that we've seen, we have lost Typhoon because that is now being made baseline for Balance Druids. However, if you go Balance Affinity, then you will get Typhoon back. Now, most of us have been running Feral Affinity throughout BFA because it has been the best affinity to take. That being said, I have done multiple dungeons now where I have gone Balance Affinity, and it's not that bad, and it's actually been quite enjoyable. You might start seeing more Druids taking Balance Affinity, specifically in weeks where we have Storming, for instance, the new Mythic Plus affix that spawns tornadoes everywhere, and that is rather punishing for melee. So having that ability to have a ranged affinity and being able to have some good damage come out of that, you might start seeing some more Balanced Affinity Resto Druids running keys. In terms of our talent tree, we've seen some changes. One of the biggest changes is on the level 35 row, which is where we have now got Heart of the Wild instead of Typhoon. This ability is on quite a long cooldown. It's a 5-minute cooldown, so you're not going to be using it that often. And essentially what it does is it buffs your affinity abilities by 30%. And if you take Balance Affinity, for instance, then it makes your Star Surge instant. So all of your abilities are buffed by 30% and you have an instant Star Surge. In the Feral Affinity, then your damage is increased by 30%. And your critical strikes that generate a combo point also generate an additional one as well. So you can be getting Ferocious Bite out more, for instance. So that's probably going to be the talent that you see taking over Mighty Bash and Mass Entanglement when there's no real need for that. You have then got some other changes with the fact that we've got Overgrowth back. However, because of the mana cost, essentially, I don't think many people are going to be taking Overgrowth on the level 45 row. You may see that, but in general, you're probably going to be running the same talents as you are in Battle for Azeroth. And let's face it, in Mythic Plus, having Photosynthesis, for instance, on the last row was an absolute godsend and helped massively in keys. So it's no real shame for me, and I'm quite happy that the playstyle is staying fairly similar in Shadowlands. So when we look at the Legendaries that have been brought out, there are a number of Legendaries that I've tested. So a couple of the generic ones, the general legendary powers that's available for everyone. There is one that increases your damage over time effects, and they increases the damage they deal at over 25% less time, and also your healing over time effects occur in 15% less time. So obviously when you apply your hots, they're healing quicker. This, I did notice quite a big difference in how many times I was having to reapply my hots, so just bear that in mind. But it was a good legendary, it was okay. And another one that you can potentially use, a general one, which I tried, was Oath of the Elder Druid. And essentially what this does is it affects some abilities and it increases their output by 75%, but it also activates Heart of the Wild for 10 seconds when you shift into your affinity's form. So if you've got this and you're in Feral Affinity, then for 10 seconds every minute, when you go into Feral, your Heart of the Wild triggers, so you will be doing more damage and gaining more combo points, for instance. Okay, legendary. It's not one, though, that I'll be playing in dungeons. The one that I am going to be focusing on first, and the one that I just used the most and just thought it was a great legendary, was the Dark Titan's Lesson, which you can put on a cloak or a neck piece. And this essentially allows you to life bloom 2 targets at the same time. So if you think about the synergy that can create between photosynthesis and this legendary, you can have life bloom up on your tank, and you can be helping out with your single target healing, and at the same time you can have life bloom up on you. So when there is AoE healing required, it can just really pump up your heals and make sure that you live through the damage that's going out. So overall, that was a really strong legendary, and I just really enjoy playing it as well. I felt it was fun to play, and for me, if something is good and it also feels fun, then for me personally, that is the winner. That is the one that I'm going to be crafting week 1. In terms of covenants then, so I've tested all 4 covenants. For me, there are 2 that are just, I'm never going to pick them. That is Kyrian and that is Venthyr as well. The covenant abilities they just felt really boring and bland, and when you look at output at the end, they just didn't really compete. The one that I did run a few times and I didn't think it was that bad and it can be quite useful was the Necrolord ability Adaptive Swarm, which is where you send out like a swarm of shadow or whatever it is, and you can either use it against enemies or you can use it on allies, and it damages enemies over time, and it also applies healing to your allies. And this is on quite a short cooldown as well, so you can use this multiple times throughout the dungeon. You can use it multiple times in certain pulls and on boss fights. You use it frequently throughout the dungeon, and it was good. Yeah, it was a new ability to be using throughout and help. But the clear winner for me personally, and one of the biggest reasons why I think it's the clear winner, is not only is the ability great, but the lore of the Night Fae just fits a druid so well. The aesthetics, the look, the feel, the zone, Ardenweald just sits with druid so well. But most importantly, Convoke the Spirit, the Covenant ability. Every time I pressed that button, I felt good inside. I was smiling. It was a fun ability to use. And the fact that you can use it in different ways, so if the group is all really low and you need to lift everybody's health bars back up, you can press this and channel 12 druid abilities over 4 seconds. It has seen a nerf recently from 16 to 12, but still, just watching the animation go off and pumping out wild growths, life blooms, rejuves, regrowths in 4 seconds, and just watching your team's health bars like shoot right back up again was really satisfying. And likewise, if I was in balance affinity at the start of a boss pull and you pop it and you watch your DPS burst just go straight to the top above everybody else, and seeing all these star surges and so on go out, it's just really, really fun. So it works in that it prioritizes abilities from the form that you are in. So if you are in feral form, for instance, then it will prioritize abilities from your feral tree. If you are not in any form and you're in Resto Spec, then it will prioritize heals, and it is just an awesome ability. So for that reason alone, really, Night Fae Druid is where it's at for me. It's where I'm going to be going. And unless it sees another major nerf, for me, it's probably the most competitive as well, especially in a Mythic Plus environment. So in terms of the actual playstyle then, if you've been playing a Resto Druid for a while now, then you will be able to just go straight into Shadowlands and just play pretty much exactly the same. Obviously, when the new expansion's released on the 27th of October, well, even in pre-patch, for instance, when that comes out and we lose corruption and so on and so forth, it's just going to feel quite slow at first. But fortunately, most of our heals are instant cast. So when we just like get a level squish and our haste drops and so on and so forth, that's going to be the biggest change, really. However, the playstyle is very, very similar to BFA. So I don't think you'd have any issues in picking one up and just carrying on with it into Shadowlands. Other things to think about as well is there have been some changes to things like potions and the engineering battle res. Yeah, that has now been disabled in Shadowlands. So that means that if you want a res, you are going to have to either have a druid, you're either going to have a lock, a DK in your group to be able to have a combat res. So the fact that not only are we just a ridiculously strong Mythic Plus healer, but we've also got an ability which is needed, just puts Druids in such a good place going into Season 1 of Shadowlands. So expect to see the leaderboards in Season 1 be predominantly Resto Druids at the top, closely followed, I reckon, by Discipline Priests and Holy Paladins. They're looking good too, Discipline Priests especially, but that'll be another video for another time. So overall, my first impressions are it's a great class in BFA and it's still a great class in Shadowlands. So you cannot go wrong with Resto Druid for Mythic Plus in Shadowlands. Let me know what you think to the changes that Resto Druid have seen or Druid have seen moving into Shadowlands. Have you had a chance to play it on the beta yet? If you have, let me know. If you like the video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. And if you're not already and you would like to see more videos that I'm going to be doing over the coming days and weeks, then please feel free to subscribe. And thanks for watching. I will see you next time.